All right. It was working faster than I thought it was. Okay. Let me go one back. There we go. Well, it's good to be with you one last time. We're down to the remnant. And so I'm glad you're here. The challenge with doing any activity after lunch, because I'm a teacher, is what happens. People fall asleep. I had an anesthetist in my church. And, we used to joke. He says, yeah, you pastors are better than us because you can put multiple people to sleep at one time. There was I'm just warming you up. There was a pastor who had a problem with one church saint who used to sit on the front row and would always fall asleep. So he decided he was going to play a little trick on him. So when the saint fell asleep, he just kind of waited, and then very softly he said, all those going to heaven, please stand. And everybody stood up except for the one saint who was passed out. And he thought, I got him. But he wasn't satisfied with that, so he decided to go one more. So he said, everybody be seated. And then he said, now all those going to hell, please stand. The guy bolted up out of his seat, and the congregation was just laughing. And the man looks around and he says, Pastor, why are you and I the only ones standing? So don't fall asleep on me, and I won't pick on you, and hopefully I won't be picked on in return. So this afternoon we're going to do it a little bit more seminar style. I'm going to move into teaching mode. I want to give you some practical strategies for how you can awaken spiritual interest. How many of you have friends, family who are not spiritually interested right now? Yeah, I think that's almost everyone. How many of you have met people on the plane, on the bus, who just don't seem spiritually interested? Yeah, how many of you have coworkers like that? And so sometimes we feel like we can't move any further because we just don't know what to do. How do we move it to the next level? And so I want to give you some keys that I think will help you to reach their hearts. And I'm going to begin with prayer, because prayer, I think, is the number one key. And I say this because when I read through scriptures, I see power in prayer. Prayer releases God to do things that he could not do otherwise. I can't fully explain this. There's a great book on prayer by this quarter's Sabbath school lesson by Peckham. He's written a book on prayer that speaks about the power that can be released when we pray. Do you believe that? Not only because prayer releases God to do something in that person's life, but prayer also changes our lives. I remember discovering this when I was in college and I was studying theology. And sad to say, I had not made much contact with my mother. My mother and my stepfather lived about 6 hours away in South Africa, and I just was one of those students, kind of out of sight, out of mind. And also because we didn't have cell phones back then. We had to use a payphone. For those of you who are younger, payphones are these little cubicles you go into and you dial and you put money in. Anyway, that's what we had to do to call her. So I hadn't been in touch for 3 weeks, which is just terrible. And she calls through on the payphone. And my roommate comes to get me. I'm down in my room studying. He says, your mom's on the phone. So I go up and I speak to my mom, and she says, your stepfather, Jono, is very ill. In fact, for the last 2 weeks, he hasn't been able to get out of bed. And I was like, oh no. And she told me more. And she said, I think this could be the end. And in that moment, I suddenly said, Mom, look, I got to go. And because I just didn't even know what to say. And I hung up. And I went back to my room to study, but I couldn't study, so I prayed instead. And when you have somebody on your heart to pray for, some of you know what I mean, because you have a child or a relative or a good friend that you're praying for. And I was just praying on my knees, Lord, please, please do something for my stepfather, because I said, if he dies now, he does not have Jesus, and I don't think there's any future for him. My stepfather was an agnostic. He wouldn't call himself an atheist. He just didn't believe that there was any evidence that Jesus had existed, and so he was agnostic. So I'm praying this, and I must have prayed for about 2 hours. And my roommate's kind of shaking me. He says, your mom on the phone again. So I go back up, and I'm fearing the worst. And I answer the call, and she says, have you been praying for Jono? I went, yes. She said, because he was lying in his bed. Remember, he's agnostic. He's lying in his bed, and he says, I think Alan's praying for me. And he says, I feel a strength. I can't explain it. And she said, for the first time in 2 weeks, he got up and went to the bathroom by himself. And he believes it's because you were praying. And I said, does he believe in prayer now? She said, no, but he believes in your prayers. My stepfather recovered and came to know Jesus Christ. And eventually it was cancer. It did take him, but not before he had made a commitment to Jesus. It began with prayer. And I know that there is a power in prayer. Some of you are praying, and some of you have given up on praying, but there is something that happens when we pray. So the first thing I want to suggest that you do is you spend time on your knees asking that God do something. And things can happen. We did a study in the Southern Union on evangelistic meetings where people were engaging in prayer, like we had done prayer sessions with them, and they were trained to pray, and they were spending time in prayer. And then we compared it with churches where we had not done that. And the result was that we had double the numbers of baptisms in the churches that prayed. In the Northwest, they went in and they did something called your top 10, and everybody wrote down their top 10 prayer list of who they felt they could start praying for. And then they wanted to see who came out of that top 10. So when they got to the meetings, they had baptisms, and they were asking, who was praying for this person. And it was amazing how many of those people had been prayed for in that top 10. But there was one gentleman who got baptized, and after a lady came forward and said, I was praying for you. He says, ma'am, I don't even know who you are. She says, I know, and I didn't know who you were either, but I didn't have anybody to pray for, so I randomly opened the telephone directory. In case you wonder what a telephone directory is, a place where you could have names and numbers. Anyway, she says, I just randomly chose some names from the telephone directory. I was praying for those names. And then when you came to the meetings and you were baptized, I realized you were one of the names I'd been praying for. Do you think that there is a power in prayer? Absolutely. So I think we have to begin with prayer. The next thing that we need to do is to show care for people. How many of you have heard the saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care? And I really think that more than just praying for people, we have to actively engage in getting to know them. So here's some essential facts on loving people. Fact number 1, you have not reached the heart until a person feels, not believes, not knows, but they feel that you care. In other words, when a person, and this was true of my stepfather, even though he was originally agnostic, but he knew that I cared for him. He knew that I loved him. All I had to do was then make the secondary connection that if I love you, then God loves you too. But first you had to see it and experience it through me. Secondly, no matter how much you love people, they will never know it until you show it through words and acts and expressions of kindness. People don't just have to get a sense like he cares for me. They have to get the idea that you are willing to do things. You're willing to engage. Our church, you heard that I've been involved in 9 church plants. Actually, we're starting our 10th. The 10th church plant, we just started this year. We started developing that. I was glad to see this morning that there's a church plant that they gave a report on. Those churches have grown because we get involved in the community. And what we do is we would adopt the street. So this is our street, because we didn't like just doing stranger evangelism. You knock on doors, you're a stranger, they don't know you. So we said once a month, we're going to go back to the same street. We're going to take cookies, we're going to see if they need any help with anything, and we're going to get to know the people on that street. And then every month we'll go back until they get to know who we are. And as a result of that, we've been able to reach those communities much better than just randomly knocking on a stranger's door. Well, we've gone one step further in this next church plant because we have something called TCI. You know what TCI stands for? Total Community Involvement. And that means one Sunday a month, Now we go out and we see who needs help in their yards, who needs help inside the house. Do you need repairs? We get to some elderly people who can't do those things themselves. And so we get ourselves involved in the community. When you show through your deeds of kindness that you care, people will be responsive. One lady said to us, "Why are you so nice? I want to go to your church because I want to find out what kind of church produces such nice people." Take a look at 1 Peter chapter 3. And this is referring to people, you're married to somebody who's not a Christian. What do you do? And it says, "As the husbands do not believe the word, they may be won over." How? Without words, by the behavior of their wives when they see the purity and the reverence of your lives. Now, I'm not saying if you're in an abusive situation that this is going to be how you win over your spouse, but I'm talking about somebody doesn't care about God. How are you going to win them over? The person who was the author of the book Case for Christ, Lee Strobel, I don't know how many of you have heard of him. He was won over by his wife because she was so kind and loving, and he was trying to disprove her Christianity and ended up proving that Jesus did exist. And it happened because his wife loved him so well. Fact number 3, winning the confidence of others cannot be forced or manipulated, but it is built through disinterested, caring love. It often happens in the little things. Isn't that true? One of my good friends, Mike Carducci, he runs a ministry called Coming Together Ministries. And he was a hairdresser who was in a relationship with a man, and he was just living his secular life. But his sisters were praying for him. And particularly one sister praying for him every day. "I'm going to pray for him, I'm going to pray for him." And then eventually she got the courage of reaching out to him and his friends, who, even though they were completely different from her. She got the courage to invite him to an evangelistic meeting. And Mike went to the evangelistic meeting. He's like, "I'm not going to go to this thing." And then he's sitting in the back, arms crossed. But as the preacher spoke about the love of Jesus, it touched Mike's heart until when the appeal was made, he found himself coming down the aisle, bawling, "I need to give my heart to Jesus." And as a result of that encounter, Mike was baptized. And he ended up, now he's running a ministry that particularly helps people who are ex-gays. It happened because Jesus touched his heart and his sister loved him. And I think when we truly love others, we make a difference. Now, I need 2 volunteers to come on up here. I need, I explain this next point. You gain influence with people only to the extent that you win their trust. Can I have 2 volunteers? Anyone brave enough? Yeah, there we go. And I need 1 more. All right, thank you, Pastor Mike. Okay, you guys, just come stand right up here. You will be my guinea pigs. So, yeah, you got to be together. Now, I'm going to imagine, this is Pastor Mike, but he's one of those aggressive pastors, which I know he's not. And he is going to teach our pagan the truth. All right, so he knows he's got to build a relationship. So we're just going to have you touch fingers. Okay, just like this. Yeah, there we go. Do they have a strong relationship? No. So what I'm going to call this, is a bridge of trust. Are you following? It's a bridge of trust. But because Pastor Mike is not the pastor he actually is, he is now this aggressive evangelist. There we go. He is going to send now a tank. I'm going to be the tank. He's going to send a tank of truth over that bridge. What's going to happen? Because that bridge is not strong enough to hold the tank. Now, here's the point. We can only share as much truth with people as our bridge of trust will allow. So what has he got to do? He's got to go from there to handshake. Let's switch. Then we're gonna build a bridge. Now we got a bridge of trust, and at least it's strong enough for a bicycle of truth. Just imagine Kermit the Frog coming across here. All right, thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it. So do you get the idea? You can only share as much truth as the bridge of trust will allow. And one of the great problems with our evangelism is we have tried to share truth when there's no trust. We're trying to tell our children, this is what you have to do, but we don't have a bridge of trust. We're trying to tell that neighbor, you've got to keep the seventh day, but we haven't built a bridge of trust. What we need to do is to build trust so that we can share truth. So this bridge of trust, we may begin just simple little deeds, acts of kindness. We're praying for them. We're looking for ways to care for them. And then when we've built that bridge of trust, then we can share with them. But how do we share? What is the process by which we can be most effective at sharing? And I love this quote from the book Evangelism. It says, your success will not depend so much upon your knowledge, truth, and accomplishments, what you've done, your degrees, as upon your ability to find your way to the heart. That's it. That inside of each person, and you say, what is the heart? That's that inner state of being. That's those deep desires, that core part of you that's maybe hidden under the surface. What you got to do is be able to figure out how to reach the heart. But what is the problem? Most people, unless you're my mother-in-law, do not wear their hearts on their sleeves. With my mother-in-law, you can sit down for 10 minutes and you'll find out every operation she's been in. And she'll start chatting with you and tell you what she ate for breakfast that morning and what she feels about what's happening at church. But most people are not like that. With most people, their heart is hidden under a mask. We made a mistake once in one of our church plans. We decided we wanted to be the friendliest church in town. So we were going to meet people at the door of their car and invite, and then escort them to the church because we were going to have that kind of greeting team. And what we discovered is that was a bad idea because, they're still having Sabbath morning discussions in their car. And it was remarkable because, the deacon would come up smiling and inside the car, the reason why we're late is because blah, 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 we never do anything. Well, it's not my fault. You see what's happening with the kids. The kids are like, well, we would have been on time, blah, blah, blah. And, they're having this discussion. The deacon knocks on the door, happy Sabbath. And it's like a switch goes off. Happy Sabbath. Because we've learned to mask. We're so good at masking. So we just let them finish their discussions in the car, and then we welcome them at the door of the church. So how do we get underneath those masks? How do we get to the heart? And I think when we think about reaching the heart, we've got to recognize that most people are not walking around going, I think I need God. They're just not walking around. They've actually buried even the desire for God underneath other things. When you ask a person, so what is it you really want, particularly if they're male, they're not going to go, I think I desire a deeper spiritual walk. They'll talk about superficial things. So to get to the heart, we have to recognize that inside each person, God has placed a longing for himself. That inside each person that there is a desire for something, but the challenge is they don't know what that desire is. They have a nameless longing. And I get this phrase, nameless longing, actually from a quote from Ellen White, where she speaks about a nameless longing. I was thinking about, what does a nameless longing look like? And the best illustration I can come up with this is imagine that you are out mowing the lawn, and it's a hot day in the middle of summer. So there you are, you're mowing the lawn. And then you're just so tired, you start to get thirsty, and you're like, oh man, inside my fridge, there is this impressive glass of cold lemonade with the ice in it. Oh, that would be so fantastic. So you stop the mowing and you go back inside the house. And then as you walk in the house, your cell phone rings. And there it is. It's somebody in my case, it might be my mother-in-law. And then I start having a conversation. And instead of like 10 minutes, it's like 30 minutes. Any of you had this? So, 30-minute conversation, then you put it down. And then you have what I call a hereafter moment. What was I hereafter? and then you're looking around, and you're like, I know I came in the house for something. And you start looking, scanning the counters. I was here for a reason, but you can't remember what the reason was. What are you experiencing? a nameless longing. You want something, but you don't know what it is. Until finally you open the fridge and there you see it. The ice cold jar of lemonade. You're like, that's it. And you pour yourself, I shouldn't do this right after lunch when you're thirsty. And you take that, glug, 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 glug. Most people don't know what it is they're thirsty for. And because they don't know what it is they're thirsty for, they don't know where to find something that will satisfy their thirst. Does anyone have a water bottle for me? I meant to bring one out here, but I forgot. I need one, and I need one that's kind of empty. Does anyone have a... Okay, there we go. She's got that's close enough. Yeah, I want to use this as an illustration. So thank you. So this water bottle represents us. Now, thank you for emptying that, because we're empty, right? But we don't know what it is we're empty for. So what happens is, it's like when you go up in a mountain or on a plane and come back down. You get back down to the bottom and your water bottle looks like this. Why is that? Change in pressure, right? That change in pressure has created a vacuum inside this water bottle. And that vacuum inside this water bottle means if I was to take this into some muddy, dirty water and put it in underneath and then open it up, it's going to suck everything in, right? And what is it going to suck in? Dirty, nasty water. Most people have sucked in nasty water because they don't know what true water looks like. And they think that this will satisfy them. They must satisfy the vacuum inside of themselves. But they're doing it. And because they've sucked in bad things and they still have kind of a vacuum, this doesn't look like a great water bottle. It's kind of bent out of shape. It's twisted. Most of us are twisted because we haven't learned how to satisfy our thirst with God. So the secret to awakening spiritual interest is to find people's thirsts. And I found that thirst is revealed in two things. I say the heart is revealed in two things. Through pain, when people have gone through pain, they become aware of their vacuum. You've ever dealt with somebody who's gone through a breakup or a divorce or a death? Then you know all about this. Or maybe they lost their job. They become so much more spiritually interested because the pain makes them aware of their vacuum. Or it happens through the thirst. You can see where they go to, like they're looking for something. I've got people, young people especially, who are in codependent relationships. Kind of works like this. They get into a relationship, they get enmeshed, and then they start fighting with each other because no human being can actually satisfy that thirst. And then it goes like this: oh, I love you, I need you so much. And then, but you're not giving me what I want, and you're frustrating me. And then they break up. And then they're like, but I can't live with you, but I can't live without you. And then they missed again, but I can't live with you, but I can't live without you. Any of you watch relationships like this? Sorry, I'm on a college campus. I see them all the time. And it's because inside of them, they have a thirst, and they think the relationship will satisfy that thirst. One young lady came to me and said, could you and your wife pray for me? I said, sure. What is it you need prayer for? Please, may God give me a date tonight. Everybody else has a date, and I don't have a date. And we said, we can't pray that prayer. Why not? Because we think you need God more than you need a date. Anyway, so it's the heart is revealed through our pain and through our thirst. And if we can touch that, we can change the heart. Isn't that what Jesus did with the woman at the well? When he met the woman at the well, he discovered her thirst. He said, look, I'm thirsty. And she's like, okay. And he's like, give me a drink. But she was the one who was much thirsty than he was. And when he could connect with her thirst, that she had been through 5 relationships, and now she was not in a committed relationship, when he connected with that thirst, he connected with her heart. See, in Jeremiah 2:13, it speaks about this thirst that we have, and it speaks about how God designed us to fill that thirst in himself. It says, for my people have committed 2 evils, 2 sins. What are the 2? Number 1, they've forsaken the fountain of living waters. So they haven't gone to the true water that can satisfy their hearts. And instead, they've gone to broken cisterns that can hold no water. Now you go, what is a cistern? A cistern was simply a reservoir where you could keep water. This is a rock cistern that you can find in the Middle East, and they would gather water in there. But if it had a crack, if the rock was cracked somehow, then the water would leak out, and they would go back and discover that the water was gone. And yet they'd keep going back, hoping that they could somehow get water out of it. Well, every addiction is like that. Every addiction is a person going back, trying to suck something into their vacuum and discovering that it never satisfies. When a student watches a movie, it's kind of strange. They're feeling lonely, so they watch a romantic love movie. Like, that's going to help them out. But they watch it, and at the end of that, they don't feel any more satisfied, so what do? They watch another movie. And then after that movie, they don't feel any more satisfied, so what do? They watch another movie. And this is the cycle that all of us are kept in. These are some of the common broken cisterns. Food, movies, sex, music, accomplishments, relationships, control, because if I could just control my life enough, I'll feel satisfied. Shopping. We actually did evangelism where we're having a small group afterwards talking about addictions. And so this man was trying to give up smoking, and he really appreciated that his wife was there. And she says, "No, I'm not here for you. I'm here for me." And he says, "Well, what's your addiction?" She says, "I'm addicted to shopping." He says, "I know, but remember we cut up your credit cards." She says, "Yes." And I took out another one. His eyes got big. And he said, "How much did you spend?" She said, $12,000. And so we had to have a counseling session after that because of the addiction was so strong. All of us are addicted to something. And God is saying, what I want you to do is to fill up what's inside of your hearts with something more powerful, something deeper with my love. Because when God's love is in our hearts, we won't be bent out of shape. We won't be looking for the wrong things. Which brings me to how I applied this to a man on a plane. I was traveling from here to Johannesburg. It's a long flight from Atlanta to Johannesburg in South Africa. And I arrived there, and I still had to get to Cape Town. And I was not feeling well. In fact, I had to visit the facilities there when I landed. And then I'm getting onto this next plane. I'm like, Lord, just give me a row to myself because I am not feeling good. And I get this row, and unbelievably, I have a whole row to myself. But right behind me is this kind of loud guy who I think has had too much to drink, and he's just talking away there. And I'm like, I'm not going to get peace. So I'm waiting there, and then in walks this lady. We were flying Mango Airlines, so she had dressed in a bright yellow suit. I still remember it. She's making her way down the aisle there in Africa. She's going, excuse me. And then she gets to my row, and I'm like, okay, this is who I'm going to sit next to. But no, she goes to the row behind, and it's this loud guy. And she says, excuse me, sir, but you are sitting in my seat. And he's like, no, I'm not. He's just making a noise. But he eventually looks at his ticket. Yes, he was sitting in her seat. Guess whose row he was going to sit in? My row. So he moves. The nice lady moves into the seat behind. And he sits right next to me. And so I'm thinking, who is this guy? So I start asking him questions. And what it was is he was a hotel owner. In fact, this was one of the hotels he had owned. If you can see on the left there, it's called the Ritz Hotel, and it has a restaurant, a revolving restaurant on the top in Cape Town. But he had lost it through a bad deal, and now he was in building new hotels in Johannesburg. And his name is Gustav Crump. And so as I started speaking with Gustav, who still seems to be a little inebriated, and so I was like, tell me more, and he's wealthy, he's got all these things going on in his life, but I know that he has thirst, and I know that he has pain. And so as he is talking with me, I ask about his family. He says, my kids, I gave them everything. And they never treated me right. And I said, do you think your kids were looking for something they didn't have? Oh, what do you mean? I said, you gave them everything. Are they satisfied? He says, no, they're not. And then I shared with him this water bottle illustration. And I said, I think your kids were looking for something that only God could satisfy. He gets real quiet. And he says, all right, Pastor, because he knew I was a pastor by then. He says, all right, that's a good one. He says, tell me what I should have done in this situation. And this was a tragic story. He told me, one of my friends, his daughter was hiking in the trails close to Cape Town. And she was caught by 4 men. And they did terrible things, and they murdered her. And he said, now my friend's wife came to me and said, where was God in all of this? And I didn't have a good answer. He admitted that. So I said, God is busy. He can't be everywhere, so he just can't take care of it. So that's why that happened. I said, that was not a good answer. You're right. And I was trying to think of what to share with him. And when you're praying, God will help you to know what to share with that person. So I said, let me share with you an experience that happened to me. I said, when I was in high school, I used to play chess. And when I was playing chess, I did pretty well. And so they organized for 20 of us high school students to play a Russian grandmaster. He was like number 11 in the world. And the only thing was he was going to play 20 of us at the same time. So he went from one board to the next, making moves, and then we'd have to move again, and then he'd come back around. Well, he eliminated all of us until he got to our top junior player. And the top junior player, he was doing really well. He was winning. And so we all gathered around, and we're watching the grandmaster. And now it's just him and our top junior player, and the Russian grandmaster's looking at the board, looking at it. And then he makes a move, and we gasp, because that move is going to lose him the game. And our top junior player is looking at it, because he can take a pawn now. If he just takes that piece, it's going to take like 10, 15 moves, but he's going to win. And so our junior player is shaking, and he takes the piece, and then the game is like won. We just see it, move after move. Our player's winning. He's gathering his forces. He's about to win the game. And then the Russian grandmaster makes a move that we hadn't seen. And we recognize the Russian grandmaster is going to win. You see, the difference between us and him was the grandmaster could look all the way to the end game. And I said to this Gustav Crump next to me, I said, God has allowed freedom of choice. And it looks like a dumb move because it allows suffering. It allows evil men to do evil things. But strangely, the losing move is the winning move when you get to the end game. Amen. Gustav Crump looks at me and he says, I've never heard anything like that. I said, yeah, because you've never met an Adventist. And I said, I want you to pray about what we talked about. So we're coming into land. I give him my details. Gustav Crump promises to write to me, which he did. And then as we were exiting the plane, the lady in the yellow dress behind leans forward and says, good sermon, Pastor. And then she exits. But I realized that any of us can reach people around us if we know what their thirsts are, if we know what their pain is. And when you can touch them with the gospel, how it meets that pain, meets that thirst, you will be effective. Effective witnessing, therefore, comes alongside of people in their spiritual journeys and awakens them to their true thirst, breaking the addictive shackles that hold them in bondage to superficial thirst. Can you see that? So our goal with another person is to think about how we can effectively do that, how we can connect with them. And I want to suggest to you that the way we do that is by thinking about what's behind their masks, what's behind their walls, when they're angry, when they're disappointed, what's driving that, what's buried beneath the surface, where are they thirsty? Because if we can make touch with their thirst, we can reach their hearts. I had a young man, his aunt said to me, he had gone through Southern, he had graduated from Southern. His aunt said, since he left Southern, he has also given up on his faith. Can you speak to him? So I said, sure. And I said, let's go for a walk, because sitting in an office just didn't seem like the right way to do that. So we went on a walk around what we call the Greenway over there. It's an area where you can go for like an hour and a half walk. And so I thought that would be enough time. So we're on this walk, and as we're walking along, he says, I don't believe in God. I don't see how God could allow suffering. I don't see how God could allow all of these problems in the world. And he says, and there's no evidence that God really exists. And so as we were walking, I decided I would just ask questions. I would just ask questions initially. And so that's what I did. In fact, I followed a process that I'm going to identify here. Number one, I had to connect with what was going on in his life to see where his thirsts were. And that meant more watching and listening than anything else. Then I was going to go through this 3-step process: investigate, stimulate, and relate. So let me show you how I did it. I did the same thing with Gustav Crump. I investigate, so I asked him, why is it that you have these questions about God? And he started to tell me some pains that he'd had in his life. And I said, I can understand that. Those are deep pains. And he said, so why should I believe in God? I said, well, what are your alternatives? By asking that question, I was getting him to think about the alternatives. So I said, every religion, every major philosophy has to deal with the problem of suffering because people suffer. So you're going to have to deal with that question either way. You can't say, I'm going to avoid suffering. You're going to have to deal with it. The question is just, is Christianity a better answer than some of the other answers? He said, I never thought of it that way. And I said, how do you feel? And this was where I was getting to stimulating them. I said, how would you feel if there was no God and when you die, there was no justice? He said, I wouldn't like that kind of world at all. And then it was like I'd got him thinking so much. He turned to me and he said, I want to believe. It's like, oh, we're making progress. He says, I want to believe. I'm just not sure I can believe. I said, what do you think is holding you back? And he said, because I just don't want it to be a lie. And at that point, I could see that the mask he had been putting up was breaking down. And so after he had shared with me for a while, I said, we've talked about what you've gone through. Can I share why is it that I believe? And so in a few short, we had about 15 minutes left of our walk, I just shared why I believed what I believed. That I had come from a place of pain, divorce. My brother had committed suicide. And I walked him through some of the tragedies I'd gone through. And then I talked how the Christian faith had actually given me a way to understand those tragedies and to have faith in God. Like I had someone alongside of me. I didn't have to go through suffering alone. He didn't say anything. But his aunt called me up 2 months later and said, thank you for having that conversation. He's getting baptized this Sabbath. Are we willing to open the door to fruitful conversations when we see what God is doing? I want to wrap up with a few thoughts here. Evangelism, page 168. The manner in which truth is presented often has much to do in determining whether it will be accepted or rejected. How we say something is just as important as what we say. Like this guy here. That man looks like he needs a tract. There's our good Adventist. He sees somebody smoking and drinking and thinking shallow thoughts. Bonsai, believe or die. Take my tract and believe. You must believe. For some reason, the man is running in the opposite direction. And then he says, well, at least I sowed some seeds. Well, I don't think that that's a very good approach. I'm going to suggest to you instead that when you think about how we approach people, you have to think of what evangelists call the interest scale. That some people are violently opposed, some people are just hostile, some are cynical, some are neutral, some are curious, some are searching, and some who are just gung-ho and unstoppable. Our role is not to try and make the violent into the unstoppable in one conversation. That's not realistic. We have to look at where they are and begin with their process, except in highly unusual circumstances. So my role is to see where God is already at work in a person's life and to help them continue growing in the right direction. So all I might do is nudge them from being hostile to at least being neutral. Are you following that idea? So it's not my role to try and share the whole gospel Adventist message. All I've got to do is nudge them closer to where they are ready for the next stage of the journey. In fact, one sociologist has looked at this, George Hunter, and he has identified on average how many links it takes for a person to reach conversion. And you know what it is? 30 links. Conversion typically results from a chain of experiences. The number of significant experiences in that chain is typically about 30 links. Just think back on your own life. What brought you to where you are now? It's because you had an experience on a mission trip. It's because you met somebody. It's because you were praying in your room. There are different experiences leading to that point where you surrender to Jesus. Why should we expect that somebody who's hostile to the faith can come to conversion in just one step? Now, there are exceptions, the Apostle Paul, but that's the exception. Most people take many links. This is from a book, Conversational Evangelism by Norman and David Geisler, a great book about how to engage in apologetics. And they say this: our goal in gospel encounters need not be to get the whole gospel message out at one time and possibly alienate those we're trying to reach. Rather, we should take the long-term view and leave that person with the desire to continue the conversation. So now I'm freed when I'm traveling on a plane. I was on the plane over here. I sat next to two people. I was able to witness to both people. I didn't have to make them Adventists. Some people think we're baptizing them in the bathroom of the plane. No, my goal is just to nudge them closer to the kingdom, and that means using the right club, figuring out what is it that they need, and nudging them to the right place. I don't play much golf, but I do know this: you have to use the right club for the distance you are from the hole. And if I'm right up where the ball is close to the hole, I'm going to use a putter, right? And I'm just going to use that putter just to get it into the hole. But if I'm all the way back at the start, then I'm going to have to use a driver, right? Because I need to hit it further. So in the same way in evangelism, we have to use the right approach to move them along in the right direction. That could be love and care at the beginning. It could be more forceful, direct questions at the end. The Holy Spirit is going to have to lead you through that experience. The goal, however, is the same. What we want to do, and I'm going to invite, we want to have you reach a person in such a way that you unlock the heart. Because there in their hearts, there is a desperate thirst, a nameless longing that only God can satisfy. And our job is to be there at the right time to direct them towards Jesus. Because if Jesus has filled your heart, you will be able to fill the hearts of someone else. I had the privilege to lead my mother to Jesus, my father to Jesus, my stepfather to Jesus, my brother to Jesus, my sister to Jesus. And it was all because I read their hearts and I learned how to let the gospel soak into those parched places and allow the Holy Spirit to do a work I could never have done. And that is to fill themselves up and satisfy a thirst from the fountain of living waters. Are you determined to do that today? God bless you. It's been good to be with you. I would like us to sing our song one last time, if we can have our choristers. And I want you to think about these words. How can we be His hands to touch the world around us? Come on up. And yes, thank you. And I appreciate your staying by. And what I want to hear from you when I come back to Kansas City after you win another Super Bowl, I want to hear that somebody in your life you prayed for, you cared for, and you shared with. And because of what you did, they will be standing in the kingdom. Can you do that for me? May God bless you.